Australia's huge mistake of selling all their water. I could have told you that, Australia. I could have said, you could have asked me. I would have said, don't sell all your water. Step one. Keep a little bit. You want to drink it. Keep a little. It's pretty short. You can take a look at it.
$10 can buy a lot of things. You can buy this pillow. You can buy a sandwich.
Okay. Oh, yum.
Worse sandwiches.
Okay, I just realized I'm very hungry and it's coloring all of my reaction. That's why I'm picking the bluefin tuna thing. I'm actually just really fucking hungry. So I need to get a little bit of fucking fish or something. Yeah, I'm going to just reorder this bad boy. Get some. There it is. And we'll just get that right on there and then close it. Okay, good.
Or, if you want, you can buy this much of Australia's Murray River. It's
oh,
one
nice.
of the few bodies of water on Earth that you can actually buy. You can't buy the water in the Mississippi River or the Pacific Ocean or my bathtub, but you can buy pretty much any of the water in Australia. Is that a good thing? Read the title. But before we get to that, let's explain why and how Australia sold all of their water in the first place. Owning water works differently in pretty much every country. Normally, which is American for in the United States and probably Canada, water ownership is determined using a system called riparian water rights.
What does that mean?
That means that water is generally considered a public good, asterisk, 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 and it's treated like air or sunlight. It can't be owned by anyone, including the government. If water happens to flow through your property, you're allowed to do whatever you want with it. You can swim in it, you can grow crops with it, you can make sweet tea with it, and you can do that even if the CDC says you shouldn't make sweet tea with river water. But
Interesting.
basically, water is tied to the land that it's on. If you want to control the water, you have to own the land. That's more or less how it works in a lot of countries, and Australia was one of them.
But like, okay, there obviously has to be asterisks on that, because if a river runs through my backyard, I can't set up a fucking factory dumping shit in it and ruin the river for everybody else. You know what I'm saying? I can't, it's not, there's got to be some fucking connections to other people's. I do that all the time. Oh, interesting.
The only
Who's going to stop me from shitting in the pond? Yeah, I don't consider you shitting in the pond a factory unless you are constantly hunched over your pond, eating and shitting nonstop.
Problem was, they didn't always have enough water to go around. So, in the early 1980s, Australians were looking for a way to ensure that the country's water was being used as efficiently as possible, and the South Australian government thought, well, what's more efficient than free market capitalism? The answer is a lot of things, but those things require a lot of work and critical thinking, so they just went ahead and created the world's very first water market instead. Here's how it works. Instead of being a public good, every drop of water in Australia would now be owned by somebody. If a river flows through your property, that water might be owned by someone else. Probably it's owned by a lot of different people.
Okay.
Water is purchased and traded using something called water entitlements, which essentially give you ownership over a certain amount of water from a certain source, like a river or dam. Now, theoretically, this is a good idea. Asterisks, asterisks, asterisks. Let me lay out a basic scenario here, which was probably more or less what the market designers were imagining would happen when they wrote this into law. I have a farm over here raising kangaroos, and Brian from Real Engineering has a farm on the other side of the river growing barley. This year, the price of kangaroos is down and the price of barley is up. I realized that I can make more money this year by selling my farm's water to Brian and letting my kangaroos die in a brush fire. This is a good thing because the water has been officially allocated away from low-value resources like my kangaroos, which are basically just rats that do CrossFit, and towards high-value resources like Brian's barley, which is a necessary component of grape nuts.
Sure.
And sure enough, the economists were right. Under this new system of water trading, Australia can make about 12% more money with the same amount of water. The only problem is, well, actually there are lots of problems. You see, most of the people buying Australia's water don't actually want water, they want, you guessed it, the fleeting sense of satisfaction derived from accumulating material wealth, or to put it less annoyingly, money. After all, a water market is still a market, and it's gonna be treated like one. a fact that seems so painfully obvious that
Right. So they're just buying it as a speculative asset to make it go up?
I shouldn't have to type it into a script, but apparently it didn't occur to Australia when they invented it. They assumed that it would be this small, informal thing among Australian farmers where they kind of just move some water back and forth sometimes, but of course it ended up being not that. Outside investors realized that Australia's water could be treated like a stock, purchased when the
Right.
water is cheap and sold for a higher price to make a profit. If you think about that for more than like 5 seconds, you'll realize that a really big brain move would be to buy up as much of Australia's incredibly limited water supply as you can, sit on it until the water situation gets even worse, and then sell it back to people in Australia who actually need water, which is everyone. This kind of speculation is like a little bad when you're trading tiny slivers of GameStop, but it's a lot bad when you're trading an entire continent's drinkable water, because then you might accidentally cause a drought or a million dead fish, or a situation where people are being forced to drink mysterious green slime that eats their brains and leaves them permanently disabled.
Okay.
Now, theoretically, the government can correct for this by
That explains Australians, by the way. They've been drinking this water. That explains my Australian chatters, okay? They've had to fucking drink sludge that eats their brains. That's where the slang comes from. Okay.
Now, theoretically, the government can correct for this by buying back water and preserving it for the environment, which, to their credit, they have at least tried to do. But regulating this market assumes that Australia's water can be easily tracked and accounted for, like any other financial asset. Unfortunately, it's not like water just magically flies out of rivers and dams up into the air and rains down on someone's... Oh, wait, it does do that. Here's the other problem with this whole water market thing. You can own part of a river, but no one really owns the rain. So you might have water entitlements to take a certain amount of water out of a certain river, but that's not the only way you can get possession of water. If extra water rains down onto your property, you're not stealing someone else's water from the river because it's not in the river yet, and now you have a pretty good reason to make sure that water is never in the river. So all of a sudden, a whole bunch of farmers have started doing something called floodplain harvesting, which is basically where you harvest flood from a plain. Instead of letting precious rainwater drain back into the rivers will be wasted on sustaining life or whatever, farmers now have every incentive to collect all of the water, let it sit in giant on-site dams, and auction it off to some guy in Canada who wants to
that's
buy a
insane.
chunk of moose. So now, instead of being used to grow more food, Australia's extremely limited water supply is just getting funneled into useless containers and used for nothing instead. The free market wins again. Now, if you want to buy some of Australia's precious drinking water, you're going to need some money first. But Sam, you're saying, I don't have any money because
That's
I keep
based.
spending hundreds of dollars a year on an overpriced streaming service that don't even enrich my mind. Well, boy, do I have a
No, is that it? That was interesting. Australia. I like that video because it was 6 minutes. They just covered the topic. He didn't give me a history of Australia. That video could have used 20 minutes about the history of Australia and the history of water. Where did water come from? What is water?